Welcome to Logistics Business Conversations, where we talk with key spokespeople in the logistics industry about topical issues. Hosted by Peter McLeod, editor of Logistics Business magazine.
Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are around the world. I'm the editor of Logistics Business magazine. And as always, it's a great pleasure to host this conversation. Selecting the right logistics software is crucial for optimizing operations, particularly warehouse operations, but the process goes beyond issuing an RFI or RFP. So to help guide us through the correct process, I'm delighted to be joined today by two experts in the field. Firstly, Phil Turton, Managing Director of Viewpoint Analysis, is an independent technology consultant. Hello, Phil.
Hi, Peter. Hi, everyone.
And joining him is Gary Taylor, the EMEA VP of Sales for Descartes Fleet Solutions. Hello to you, Gary.
Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, everybody. My role and responsibility here at Descartes is all around all things fleet, which is routing, mobile, telematics, and customer engagement and experience. I've spent roughly 10 years in supply chain and logistics technology, covering career spans at Gartner and also Verizon and kind of sort of more recent history. Yeah, really looking forward to getting into the weeds and the topics of conversations. Certainly a very, very hot topic in the world of software at the moment.
So before we get into that, can I ask you, Phil, to briefly introduce yourself and just say a few words about your role?
Yeah, hi, everyone. So my name is Phil Turton. Viewpoint Analysis acts as a technology matchmaker. So we help customers to go from what's out there in the market and what problem have I got, how can I solve it, to selecting a vendor. And my experience, just by way of a bit of background for you, I'm an ex-enterprise salesperson. So I've worked for companies like SAP, HP, Informatica, those kind of companies for about 20-some years before starting Viewpoint Analysis. So hopefully I'll give you a good perspective of what it's like to be on both sides of the spectrum when it comes to RFIs, RFPs, and how we can do things a little bit better, in my opinion.
Thank you both, gentlemen. Right, time for me to shut up and to throw to Phil, who will tell us what a business should be doing to ensure they select the ideal software partner.
Brilliant. So in that brief introduction I gave you, as I say, I can see both sides of the spectrum. And when I set up Viewpoint Analysis, the whole point of that was because I wanted to be able to help customers to move quicker, to get from where they are today to getting a solution and getting on with the project. And also from a vendor's perspective, it's just really difficult. So my hope in Viewpoint Analysis really is to kind of help customers to get on with that. So first thing I would say is, I think there's a new approach to vendor selection that's really important here. IT procurement is pretty broken right now. So if you look at the latest survey from Lupio, about 35% of companies who receive an RFI or an RFP, they decline to bid. So let's think if you're an ERP requirement and SAP doesn't bid, or Oracle doesn't bid, or Microsoft Dynamics doesn't bid, or indeed if you're in, CRM and Salesforce doesn't bid, that's a massive problem. The average vendor selection process just takes too long. It takes multiple months, sometimes years. And the problem is that companies make that the project rather than the project, and therefore it just delays everything. Vendors tend to get asked to respond to thousands of questions. And what do they do when they see that? Well, they just look at it and either give you a stock answer, or they don't bother responding and qualify out. And I just think generally in that whole process that the relationship balance is all tilted to the requirements, and rather than getting the experts to tell you what they really think. And when you're in sales, it's very difficult. So when I was in sales as an individual contributor, I might be managing about 20 or 25 different opportunities at any one time. My extended team, the pre-sales guys, the legal team, all the people that are really important, and I would say sometimes more important than sales, they're managing hundreds of opportunities. Each pursuit costs tens of thousands of pounds. And if you're in one of the top echelon vendors like SAP, for example, big brand name company, you'll be winning 1 in 3 opportunities. So that's not too bad. But if you're not, it might be 1 in 5 or 6 opportunities. So that, the pursuit cost is a big decision for everybody. Nobody goes into these things lightly. And in the sales team, they generally have an annual target to hit. So obviously, if you're looking at things that are further down the line, and if your procurement process is going to go on for quite some time, then clearly those companies are going to have second thoughts about being part of it, because the sales team will be absolutely focused on closing business that's in front of them. So we've got a real kind of mismatch here. We've got on the one side the kind of technology companies who are fielding these requirements and having to be very careful about how much they're spending, where they're investing, and the opportunity cost of not investing in another project because they're working with you. And on the other hand, that kind of process that can be a project in its own right and just goes on and on and on. When you're doing that initial market assessment, that's the time to go wide and deep. You want to be talking to the major players in that marketplace. You want to be talking to the niche vendors. You want to be talking to the guys who are in the Gartner Magic Quadrant, for example. But you also want to be talking to the companies that are, maybe up and coming. The way you do that and why you do that is because you're wanting to see what good is and what not so good is. And you'll only find that out from doing that market assessment piece. And we do this thing called the technology matchmaker process, which is just that. It's a very simple, how can you help us? What do you do? Quickly assess the marketplace, do a thin kind of process with everybody that you want to, and learn what's out there. The other thing I wanted to say is you should be selling to the sales team. So bearing in mind what I said earlier, that each of these tech vendors have a decision to make as to whether or not they're going to work with you. Clearly, just throwing them a massive RFP is a really stupid, bad idea. You should be telling them why you want them to be involved. Why have you chosen them as part and parcel of this long list exercise? What's in it for them? What are they playing for? What's that kind of golden carrot at the end of the stick? What are they going to win if they invest? You want to be showing them that it's dead easy. This is something simple, that you care about their time, you care about their investment. You're trying to make sure that you bring all these people together and you work with them as a partner rather than a supplier relationship. We issue what I call a challenge statement. So we just dump all those thousands of questions. And I say the problem is that the partner will look at those questions and they'll either give you a copy and paste answer that they've done thousands and thousands of times before, which is pointless for you, or they'll not bid. So the way I operate is we say, put out there a challenge statement. Who are you? What do you do? How do you do it? What's the problem that you're trying to address? And let the vendors come back and tell you how they can help. Because after all, they are the experts. These guys have done this thousands and thousands of times with customers in your industry and in parallel industries as well. So ask them for their help. Streamline everything. So again, rather than making the process the project, the best way to achieve that is just to get through things as quickly as you can. And once you've done that, you get to the shortlist. That's when you spend your time with the shortlist of partners. That's when you invite them in to really get to know your business in much more detail. That's when you get extensive demonstrations, or maybe you do, customer supplier kind of events. Maybe you look at them to bring in their viewpoints on the ROI and how they can help you build a business model. But you go long on the long list, but you go short on that short list. You don't want to be really spending much more time with the guys who aren't in your process. Don't bring people in it just to make up the numbers. Get that short list down to maybe 4 or 5 at a maximum and spend the time with them. There's a much better way of doing it. If you follow this kind of process in the way that I work at Viewpoint Analysis, all the vendors, or almost all the vendors, will be part of the process all the way through. And that's so important, because if you start to get 1 or 2, so in this industry that we're talking about now, Descartes decide to qualify out day 1, or one of the big players, of their competitor group qualify out day 1, that's not great. You're losing somebody who could be a partner for you. So getting this right, I think, is really important.
In terms of sort of creating the long list, what sort of numbers are we looking at for that? And where do you go to select your vendors?
Yeah, that's a good question. So as I say, that long list really is not taking up the time of the vendors. Because that long list, if you do it correctly, is just an initial conversation. And you might ask them to present how they can help against your problem statement. My view is, therefore, it can be as long as you need it to be. And every industry has a different kind of, set of competitors, companies that they work with in this space. So it might be 10, it might be 12, that kind of order. In terms of how you go out and look at it, obviously you can go and, you can talk to the likes of Gartners and Forresters and all those kind of companies. You can look at G2, which, with more kind of peer review and, other customers kind of reviewing them. You can look at industry information. So, for example, Viewpoint Analysis put out information. So there's a whole host of consultants that do similar things. But my view is that you should actually take from the people that you know best. So your teams will have a team of people that work with them. And guess what? Those people will have probably used the technology that you're looking to buy. They'll have been in your competitors and seen how other competitors use it. They'll have used it in maybe previously in a different life completely. They'll also have a network of people that they can reach out to. So they'll be able to kind of ask questions of some of their, peer group in other areas. What have you used before? So I think in summary there, Peter, there's a whole host of ways to build that long list. But I take a lot of, you can obviously go out to the, companies like myself, but that I think is the secondary piece. The most important piece is your peer group, your colleagues, companies that you've worked with before.
Let's not forget industry publications such as Logistics Business, Phil, of course. So it seems like sort of soft skills here are very important. The communication skills as well. Can you talk us perhaps a little bit more about the skills that are required there when you're selling to the sales team?
Yeah, I mean, I think the summary from my perspective is don't treat the vendors as though this is something that is that they should be involved in, that they should be grateful to receive, because that's not the case. As a sales manager in the case of Gary, and looking across his team, or as a sales contributor, every time that something comes across your desk, it's a difficult decision to make. Do I go for, you might be a brilliant brand, you might have a great solution that you're trying to achieve there, but, we could be really busy. I could be really busy as a salesperson. I could be working on something that could be, defining for my year and will feed my family. Yeah. So it's very important not to just assume that you can send across an RFP and that company will be grateful. You've got to really be very clear. Why are you talking to them? Why are you talking to Gary? Why have you picked up the phone? Why have you asked him to help rather than another 400 different people like Gary? I think it's sometimes difficult. So, for example, I've got a call with we've got a vendor call early October with another customer, and I've asked them to sell to the sales team. To be open and transparent and tell the companies why they can help. And it's not something that comes very easy to most people. The idea of selling to a salesperson, that's bizarre, isn't it? But it's very important. Not selling as in selling a car, but just trying to get across why it's important that you're doing the project, what you're looking to achieve, and how this company, we think right now, but we don't know, can help.
So you've got your 1,000 question spreadsheet. We've torn it up and thrown it into the bin. And you're now going to replace that with what you'd call a challenge statement. So how do you cover so much ground in a simplified way when the 1,000 question spreadsheet existed for a reason? So how are you going to cover all of that ground?
So I don't think it did exist for a reason. I think what happens is people aren't used to buying. So what they tend to do is they look for this mythical thing called a spreadsheet of questions. And those questions, probably half of them, they don't care what the answer is. The customer really, when they're putting out something to market, care about lots of things, but not everything. And also, why would you kind of change it? Well, you do it a little bit of a different way. You try to make it a bit more simple, because in that long listing piece, we're just getting to know the vendor. We don't need to know them inside out, back to front, upside down. We just want to get to know them. Can they help us? How can they help us? And to get them to show us why they've got the experience to work with us as a company. I just try to coach my customers that, let's look at the things that are important to you, not everything. So effectively, if you give them a spreadsheet, you will get what you've asked for, not what you need.
Right. Yeah. And so really at this stage, then we're now moving from long list to short list, and you already specified, sort of the ideal number within that. So you're going to dig down a little deeper now into this, into your vendors. What sort of additional knowledge do you need to extract from them to get down to our one?
So you need to score appropriately, and I always say score throughout. So you've always got scoring. You Every time you have an interaction with any of the vendors, you want to make sure you're scoring at all points. So then at the end, you don't forget everything. But I think this is where you need to become a partner, right? So you can very rarely do customers buy on price. You assume they do, but they don't, right? And very rarely do they buy just on functional fit. You assume that they do, but they don't necessarily do that. Where you do need to be very clear is, can I work as an individual? Can my team, can my company work with this company that we're talking to today? So it's very much about the cultural piece. It's about, if it was my money, my mortgage, would I put it on that particular vendor that can help me? So there's a lot more that you're trying to gain at the shortlisting piece to vendor selection piece. You're wanting to have some cost numbers and, things that are hard. But a lot of it, in my opinion, is very soft as well. It's what you think those vendors can bring to you to the table. Do you trust them? The other thing I would say is, when you get down to that shortlist, bring the partners in. They should be all partners at that point. None of those 4 or 5 in that shortlist should be on that list if you don't believe they can deliver a solution for you. Let them help you with the business case, perhaps. Let them show you, other customers and introduce you to other customers. Let them show you an in-depth demonstration. Maybe, and I don't think any vendor I've ever worked for would want me to say this, but maybe you could do a little proof of concept if you need to, So there's lots of things you can do, but what you're trying to do at that very end is find out, do I trust this business?
And just whilst we're on the subject of scoring, we've been asked what customers should be looking for. What areas should a customer be looking to score, and should some of them carry greater weight than any other of the areas?
So I don't think anyone should you shouldn't have extra weight on anything, because you want to look at it in the round at the end. And whoever you're presenting those numbers to, so let's say it's the chief finance officer, or in some cases it's the MD or the chief executive, they will weigh them themselves, right? So for example, when the CFO sees that your preferred vendor is twice the cost, he doesn't need, or she doesn't need, for you to know that that's twice as important. It's really important to them. Do you know what I mean? So that will fly out really. But yeah, the things that we tend to score on, and it can be different for different companies and different requirements. But functional fit, the cost, the relationship, the over experience with the sales team. There's a bunch of things that are different in every case. And I think every one of the ones I've ever done probably have had different scoring metrics, because what we want to do at the very beginning of this process is to work out what's important. Sometimes the winner isn't the winner. So they might score really well, but it comes back to that point at the end. And everybody who's gone through this process knows that once this goes up the chain and it hits the board, and for all of you that have seen this before, this is really important. When it hits the board, there will be things that happen at that board that nobody anticipates. It's Bob, who's the chief executive, who says, I've worked with them before. Why did we ever include them? They are not ever going to darken my door. Or it's from a left field perspective. It might be the HR director who heard from a neighbour that, that's never going to happen. You should never do that. I heard something bad. All sorts of things happen when they get to the top. So the scoring isn't, but it's not the be all and end all. Fundamentally, it comes down to the human beings making a decision.
Gary, I see you nodding along there, and I understand that the knowledge that's coming out of Phil is extremely valuable to all of us. But Phil's done all the heavy lifting up to this point, so I'm going to throw it over to you and just ask for you perhaps to share some of your experiences of procurement from the perspective of a software vendor.
Yeah, first off, a lot of what Phil was talking about is first of all, as a purchaser, but also a sales rep or salesperson within an organization, a lot of that resonates with me in terms of what you were talking about. The first thing I'm going to say is and somewhat a similar line is, we often at the start of any conversation need to remind a business of just the goal and objective of the particular project. Now, that could be implementing something new or replacing something old. So again, there's often a level of constant reminder of what is the goal, the singular goal and objective. Okay, now within that, you have to engage multiple business units. Now, generally speaking, there is not one product or software or solution that only impacts one team, right? And we'll take ERP. It seems like it's a finance-driven solution. It's not. It's absolutely a customer-driven solution as well, because if your invoicing is incorrect and you're sending out the wrong products, ultimately your customers are typically unhappy, right? So, engaging multiple business units along that way is super important. Now, there's, again, talking statistics, most people say you need to engage with 11 people. Actually, I kind of sort of flip it on the head. It's generally 5 business units at minimum that you would engage with. It could be finance, customer service, logistics, sales as a part of an organization. But you should always be engaging with multiple people. Now, that brings me on to a point that we often, as salespeople, come up against in any RFI and any RFP, and it's this hidden behind a spreadsheet or this sworn secrecy around this particular project. And generally speaking, when we receive RFIs and RFPs, we have started to see a trend of change to this. But typically, what we see is only engage us through an RFI and RFP. Now, as to all the fun, that's not going to get you what you want to achieve as a general rule. Now, I appreciate the notion behind it, but it genuinely makes a supplier's task super difficult to actually understand, what we're trying to achieve as a goal and objective, but how that's going to be achieved across multiple different business units. So I just want to sort of reference that in terms of kind of how we attack and approach it. Again, kind of carrying on the notion or the talk of an RFI and an RFP, they're generally focused on feature and function and requirement, not on an outcome. What is the goal and objective that you are trying to achieve, not by the replacing of software, not by the introducing of new software, but the business goal? Hey, we're looking to reduce our spend on 3PL. Again, that's in my world, in the world of logistics. I'm looking to reduce the amount of hours that we spend in our planning capacity. Great. But underneath it, there's some underlying tasks or topics that can be achieved as well. And we often spend a lot of time reminding people, and my team probably hate the phrase that I use on a very regular basis, but ultimately software and the element and the design of software is to automate a process that is currently being done manually. The most simplistic form, it's macros, right? You're trying to do something that you repeat on a really regular basis. In one click of a button, just continue to do this, right? It's that automated decision-making process. But how do you want to achieve it? And again, this is a constant reminder. To a point that Phil made a little bit earlier, suppliers have typically, especially enterprise grade, have typically deployed this solution into thousands, if not tens of thousands of customers. Realistically speaking, as one business, you may have replaced or changed that technology 2 or 3 times in 15 to 20 years. The level of experience and understanding of how big that shift is absolutely encapsulated within a supplier or a vendor. So utilizing that knowledge is really important. And a discovery isn't to ask a load of questions. It's to understand, can we help? And if the answer is no, I'd like to think as an organization, myself and the rest of the team, if we can't help, hands up and say, we can't help you here. And I think that's fairly sensible around Phil's notion of, salespeople are wanting to fill their time, not with conversation, but something that's going to make a material difference or change within that business and organization. It's hugely important. Which then comes us on to what I would call the North Star. Now, again, spreadsheet hidden behind. We have this notion that we should not share competitors. Now, from my view, from a sales perspective, it's not to work out who we're up against. It's not to work out whether it's pricing. It's not to work out anything along that lines. What it's really a true measure of is, first of all, are you going to be as open as you're asking us to be as salespeople? Number one. But number two is, the ability to articulate either a unique positioning for that technology or solution that could be inherently valuable for you as a business, or number two, to sit there and say, hey, That's your business profile. This is who you are. Do you know what? That competitor that sits in that space as their ideal customer profile is really well suited to you. Now, we talk about people moving businesses. Now, generally speaking, you see people, again, in the logistics world, once you're in logistics, you're in logistics. Now, that means you have a heap of knowledge that you can transferable knowledge from business to business and organization to organization. It's the same principle within sales. We do hold and have this knowledge of existing technologies because that's where we've come from, or we know the market incredibly well, and that's a huge leap. So sharing competitors, incredibly valuable. Both parties should have skin in the game, and there is a level of investment that any project, if you're going through an RFI and RFP, it's generally speaking going to be a high value project within the organization or the business, or it's a high value spend. Generally, we'll kind of sort of see that particular world. Skin in the game from both parties. It's a mutual response and mutual respect with each other to say, we're putting our time and attention into it, spending tens and thousands, as Phil mentioned, and that's a low value opportunity, generally speaking. It's tens of thousands. What resource have we got from your side to work on this particular project? So that's key. Last couple of points. Again, on this magical spreadsheet, Phil mentioned, how do we score things? I see 3 areas that people are generally interested in. Capability, architecture, and security, super important right now. And last of all, deployment and customer success. Those are the 3 things that you should really bucket and not wait. But those 3 things is, can they do all those 3 things? If the answer is yes, yes, and yes, the question is, why would we not proceed with that particular technology? Or who's better positioned to support us in those particular areas? No. This is weighted at 30%, this is 50%, and that's 20%. It should absolutely be can they do my 3 core goals or meet my 3 core goals and objectives? Whilst also thinking today's problem may not be tomorrow's problem. Where do we want to be in 3 to 5 years' time? So it's super valuable there. And my last piece that I think is the most critical thing that anybody should do through an RFI and RFP process. Most of them are positioned on one business outcome, on business goal. Use the organization, whether it's myself or any other company out there, to co-create a business case. You can bet your bottom dollar that any rep within that business, especially when we're looking at kind of mid to enterprise grade technology, has worked with an organization that has deployed their technology in the course of the last 3 to 6 months, or if not slightly longer than that, depending on their tenure, that knows where the business value has come from. And that additional bucket of value, whether it may be customer service related, whether it may be somewhere else, can be hugely valuable to turning a business case into, we spent a heap of time, no decision in terms of moving forward, to heap of decision, wow, we didn't realize that this would have a fundamental impact in our business in that area.
Probably it's a good point for me to bring things to a close. And I just wanted to thank you both, Phil and Gary, for your excellent contribution today. It remains for me to say goodbye to you, Phil, and thank you very much for your insights. And goodbye to you also, Gary, and thanks for your input today and on this very interesting topic. And it remains also for me to say goodbye from me, Peter McLeod, and thank you very much.